Welcome to the Post Shift Podcast, your raw look at the hospitality industry, brought to you by SHC. What has happened in Post Shifters? Welcome to another episode of the Post Shift Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Shawn Soole. Today's episode is with Kristoff Coates, my partner in Exemplar LM, which is a online marketing company for the liquor industry that we're really focusing in on during COVID and post-COVID in the way of website development, Shopify stores, and online marketing. And so we really get down to the nuts and bolts of why people seem to be scared to take that hurdle of making that move, because I think online marketing, websites, that sort of thing sort of gets put into this category of being a big business or big corporations mentalities, but the application of a lot of things we're talking about today to small business can really, really get you good ROI. And we chat about the hurdles that exist for a lot of businesses to take that step into the online thing. And I think, me personally, I think a lot of it has to do with the Wizard of Oz mentality, where it's all smoke and mirrors, and then you pull back a curtain and it's like, Jesus, it's just a dude on a little old dude with fucking pedals and levers and strings. And so we sort of peel back a lot of that stuff and start talking about it. I try to keep Kristoff on point when it comes to not getting too geeky and keeping it in layman's terms for a lot of people so that they can understand it. But I hope you get a lot of value from this. Really listen to it about how you can apply a lot of this to your own business, because I think a lot of people just don't understand the concept of it all. And when something scares people, it usually doesn't resonate with people as well as it should. But I try and break it down the best I can. Hope you enjoy this episode, guys. Thanks as always for the support, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
Introduce yourself, and let's start. I always love the origin story. I like Kristoff Coates, number one, because I'm a comic book nerd. And the Kristoff Coates number one. How did you get into what you do now? Like, define what you do now, and then how did you get into it? Also hooking in that hospitality experience.
Right. So my hospitality experience. So let's start there, because that was like first job kind of stuff. I did busing and then waiting up in Nanaimo, and then I got into sales, computer sales, and then from there, selling computers and all that kind of stuff is sort of like being trapped in time. You're having the same conversation over and over and over again. It's like Groundhog Day. So I was always interested in, better business solutions for people. Like, often I would deal with small business owners that needed a computer to do email scheduling and accounting.
What year is it?
Then 2001.
I like to remind the kids that 20 years ago, computers were very, very different than they were now. Yeah, very much so. By 2003, after doing just a ton of sales, millions of dollars in computer sales kind of stuff, I went out and started a consulting company with a buddy of mine, Devin Carrier, and it was SIP Consulting, and it was basically going into Victoria businesses and like looking at their existing system, and we started building intranet pages for them. So basically like a simple bookmark website for how to get around. And, it was okay, but I ended up running into Scott Wortell, who was running a legal marketing website here in Victoria. He lived here in Victoria. There's people in Whistler, Vancouver. It was sort of like a remote business, it was like the original remote business. And all of the clientele that he had were all U.S. law firms. So I was immediately intrigued by how you could work from home with U.S. law firms, and I jumped in, and I started off as sales there. And it was all, find plaintiffs for a law firm for, problem X or problem Y. Some of the cases I worked on, dealt with a whole bunch of those things. And while I was trying to find, very specific plaintiffs for these class action lawsuits, right? Because you need one. You need one person to represent everybody else. And so that person, the criteria to find that one person is hard. in a sea of Blockbuster customers, who's going to be the one person that can, take the stand and take the defense drilling, right? They got to be able to be perfect. And so that's the criteria we had to find. And it wasn't just that, for class actions, we also did mass torts and stuff. And so one of the big things with the website, we were running bigclassaction.com. And there was a couple others. It ended up later being rebranded to Lawyers and Settlements. But it was all the biggest thing was, how do you find those people? And I went from sales to SEO and digital strategy. And my title never changed. I just realized that there was no one really in the company that was really focusing on that. And I just started deep diving like crazy. And then eventually Scott sold the company. I went with the new guys. The new owners were used to be the CEO of Avon in Japan, and the other guy was he used to work for Intel at a high level. And this was sort of like, they bought it. They were supposed to do a big cash infusion, and I realized that they didn't know what they're talking about. And I went off on my own, and I started doing that digital strategy for law firms sort of embedded. How do I help the firm get better? So then I started analyzing their websites. Like I'd already fixed some major problems. Like we became a Google News source, right? So we ran, you'd see a CNN story in Google News, you would see our story in CNN News. And so I'd learned so much by then as being a publishing, an online publisher, that I thought, we could do it with law firms. And we're pretty successful. So,
do you think when it comes
Yeah.
Do you think when it comes to the stuff that you're doing, like, to me, I now being in a different sphere of sort of workplace in the hospitality industry, I think that do you think there's a fundamental issue with that? A lot of people in the hospitality industry, we're talking about distilleries, wineries, breweries, still live in an age that they think that, which is still a big part, but being great at what you do, good service, good atmosphere, good food, will bring the guests through the door. And whether you make a new product or a great product, then people will naturally just follow. Do you think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of the evolution of where most of our lives are now digital and online compared to 25 years ago, when print ad and all that sort of stuff, and you'd find these places by walking down the street? Do you think there's a fundamental misunderstanding in the hospitality industry for this sort of conversation?
Yeah, I think that basically, I think that people that are running establishments think that if they provide a quality experience, people will just come in the door. And I have a lot of, I got family, I've got friends that are all in the hospitality industry. And so, it's always been one, really close to the heart. I actually did a lot of work sitting at restaurant tables, reading and studying. I think that people don't understand. Well, that's not true. They do. They are beginning to really understand, like Yelp and places like that. Like they understand, negative reviews. I mean, that every business owner understands that. That's, in my mind, a bit of a racket, that Yelp idea. But, the concept that people come through the door again and again and again if they've had a great experience. But I don't know if they realize that they can continue to encourage and warm up and encourage and drive back that traffic, or friends of those people without the word of mouth. Like you can see when somebody likes something on Facebook, right? You can see, if someone is a follower of that page, you can see, and that, Google's got the same thing. You can see recommendations. And if it's somebody that in your Gmail list, they're going to show up. So there's a lot of ways to encourage people to come through the front door, or try your product. And I think, everybody's all about the experience, but how do you get them to your experience is the biggest one.
Well, I do find it sometimes funny when I do discuss the impact of social media marketing with restaurants and bars and distilleries and stuff. And they're like, I'm just not sure if it's going to give me ROI and stuff. But then they hold so much weight in TripAdvisor, Yelp, well, whatever Urban Spoon is these days.
Right.
But they still hold weight on that.
Open Table.
Open Table. Like, they have so much weight on those platforms. But then you talk to them about social media strategy, and they're like, yeah, I'll post once a week on Instagram, and I'll do a post on Facebook. I don't really understand boosting and stuff like that. So I don't really need to do anything with that. The dichotomy of understanding of both platforms, I find a little bit ingrained in the industry.
Yeah, but I think that the manager or business owner is looking at things that tell them that it generated revenue. So if you see a Yelp review, whether it was good or bad, it made you money. If people used Open Table for a reservation and that reservation was fulfilled, it made them money. If they posted an Instagram thing and a whole bunch of people like it and share it, they don't know if it made them money.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a challenge unless you're able to put in a system to track it. Right? So, can you build a system where you track people coming through your front door or people buying your product through social media? And you can. Like, straight up, you can. I mean, that's what Instagram, Facebook, Google, they all want you to track those results. So they have tool sets. And there's lots of third-party companies that provide tool sets that you can, merge all that data.
Let's get into that in a little bit. Let's go back to websites and let's get back to the fundamental stuff that every business has to have a website these days. Everything from Squarespace to WordPress to Wix makes it relatively easy to build a pretty simple website pretty quickly, whether it be just a simple landing page or a couple of links to a PDF menu or spirit guides and stuff like that before we get into like Shopify stores and stuff like that. To be really honest, like when you and I sat down, like originally, to give some context to the listeners, we didn't even think that we would ever partner up and work together, but we sat down as like a mentee-mentor thing. And all of a sudden, like in a space of like 4 months, it's gone from, hey, Shawn, can I have a coffee and just chat about like this work stuff that I got to do with, to, oh, by the way, we're just going to pitch a massive idea to a multinational company.
Right.
And after our conversations, to be honest, I've changed my tune about websites. Like, for me, a website's always been something you needed. But
a brochure. It's a brochure, right? Everyone looks at it like it's a brochure.
With most of my energy and time being on the social media side of things and seeing a Facebook page as being my landing page, not my website. And since we chatted, I've changed my whole mentality towards that, from everything from how many words a blog post has to have to how often I post and so on and so forth. What do you think the 5 fundamental issues that most hospitality people fall into when it comes to website development and building one out?
Well, usually it's the viewpoint is I just need a website and it's going to be, 4 to 5 pages and, homepage, product page, recipe page, menu page, whatever that happens to be, where we are, contact us, there's like a set criteria that everyone thinks about when they build their page or they build their website. But they often pick a platform that's cheap, ineffective. There's no, the way that Google has set things up, you need to plan long term. And, it is a marathon to be on the web, and you want to be there because the rewards are really high. So when you plan long term, you should plan like, hey, I'm building this website today. This website's going to last me 2 years, and then I'm going to have to build a new one. And like everyone's like, what? But like, I'm going to have to build a new one because technology has changed, or the algorithms are going to radically change. Like, I saw the other day that there's a big algorithm shift coming up, and Google gave extra notice this time because of COVID. But like, you need to be aware that you might need to either change your whole website, a portion of your website, or your strategy as the web shifts. And when you do those strategies and you plan like that, then you know how much you need to spend, you know how much you need to, your ROI needs to be, and you can develop some sort of content strategy. And that content strategy should be, my website is the center of a big wheel. Think of it like an old wagon wheel, and every stick that goes out of that wagon wheel is a channel to bring in new customers. And it shouldn't be, I will hire a company or I will hire a developer to make me a super pretty website before you figure out what is your website all about. What are your, I'm going to use verticals. Often, with a single, like a restaurant might be its own vertical. So there might all just be, this is the restaurant, this is the things we offer. But, a distillery would be, we are a distillery, and these are our different product lines. Each product, each spirit might be a different vertical, right? And you need to stack that content. Google gives extra weight when you stack similar content, right? So all the gins are together. All the whiskeys are together in another vertical. So think of like silos of content, right? On a farm, you got grain silo 1, grain silo 2, and so on and so forth. And you need to plan that out, because if you want to go back afterwards, you sort of have to jury rig it. You gotta move stuff around, and it's not as effective for your marketing platform. So those are really big key things. And then when you sit down with whoever your web developers are, you do want to make it pretty. You do want to be captivating. I'm not saying you don't, but you want to make sure they use the technologies that allow for your website to be fast. Does it look good on mobile phone? Does it pass all the industry standards? Like Google has industry standards. It's free tools. You can run your website on it. They've got it in Webmaster Tools. You make sure that you are plugged into Webmaster Tools. You're plugged into Google My Business. You want to be in these places, Google Analytics, whether you're using the Google Tag Manager or just the analytics code. And all of that will become super relevant down the road when you start doing data collection and customer analyzing for repeat use, where they are, all that kind of stuff. So that's your fundamentals, right? Have a plan. Know where you're going to be in a couple of years, because you're probably going to need to do a new website. Make sure that you plan for future additions. Like if you're a distillery and you've got one product line right now, you're all whiskey. What happens if you want to do another line? Where would that fit on your website? And it's important that, structurally speaking, you need to think about having an architect set up your system before you have the interior designer come in and make everything look awesome. It's super important.
Well, I think that's the best analogy you've used. I think that's the best analogy you've used, is that you can have a beautiful house, but if the foundations suck, then your house, that pretty house, is going to fall down really, really quickly.
Or it won't. What'll happen is there'll be lots of problems that keep popping up that you keep paying for, and you'll either decide whether you want to spend the money on it or kick it down the road, and then one day your website doesn't load.
And the hard thing is, I find for a lot of businesses, and I think you're going to be able to give a little bit, and this is a nice segue into our next sector, how do you justify an ROI on a website? Because I think we've talked about it in length. Utilizing the data that the website collects is something that I don't think a lot of business owners even consider thinking about.
Right.
And utilizing that data is where your ROI comes back. So a lot of these people, when you say, it's going to cost you $10,000 for a website, they're like, I'm just going to do mine on Squarespace, and it's going to cost me $50.
Right. And it'll work. I'm not here to say that won't work. It's just, are you actually making as much money as you could have if you had made the better website with the better functionality to find out who your customers are and increase the base of customers? So you know that these people like coming, all air quotes, but this demographic of people are fans of you on a Facebook or on Twitter or Instagram, and they come into your establishment, or they buy your product all the time. Well, there are tools out there that you can now take that and, flip it and say, I want a lookalike audience, right? Or you've got an email, use MailChimp, and like you want people to interact with your product or your services, and it's super important that your website, powers that, not the social media sites. Like, you can use them as tools, and you should, all the time. But, there was a MySpace, and a lot of people are pretty unhappy with how Facebook is doing things these days. I'm not saying that they're going to go away or anything like that, but I think that you might start to see a splintering of audiences, right? So where is your audience located? Your website should be the one place that everybody of all ages and all preferences, whatever they like, they can go to your site, they can interact with you instead of on these social media platforms. Because if they change their rules, you don't own any of that stuff, right? When Facebook went from like, you can post and all your fans will see it, to now only a small percentage of your fans will see it, and you have to pay us for everyone else to see it. But if you built up everyone just goes to your website all the time, and you have all of their emails in your MailChimp, automated system, then, you don't have to pay to boost as much. You can notify all your fans through your email that there's a new post, and then they can go that way and not even pay them, right? There's lots of ways to work around these other channels, but it's important that, your brand website, whether it's a restaurant, distillery, whatever, that is like the central hub. And I guess the last big one, I sort of left this out, but this one's super key, is that your website needs to answer questions. People go online to ask questions. Where are you? When are you open? What are you serving tonight? What are your products? How do I make this? Your website needs to answer those questions, because if your website doesn't and your service doesn't, but your competitor does, when they get their answers, they're going to be like, oh, hey, that's a new restaurant, or that's a new, I don't know, gin or whiskey or whatever. Like, that's a new thing. I'm going to go try that. Well, are they going to come back? I don't know. Right? And when you're answering those questions, maybe people don't realize this, but 50% of searches, you Google search something, end up in no clicks. And that's because Google has answered it for the person without, right? So that's like, who's in that movie? Who's the cast member? Where is this location? When are their business hours? Those are all no-click results these days. So it's super important that you answer those questions, because they will include you. It's called rich snippets, and they will include you on the page. You ask a question, and then you'll notice that there is a series of other questions underneath that are people also ask, or people ask this, people ask that. Like, you should be, when I go back to the plan, you should be looking to answer those questions. That should be part of your strategy going forward.
Like, what is XXX brand? The answers come underneath, and your website doesn't even get touched.
Right. Yes, exactly. Well, there's a whole bunch of things. Like, you could do, like, if you type in right now, you could type in, like, buy gin, and you will see people will have marked up their products with specific schema code and fed it into Google, and now you can actually, like, buy gin just for those. I think there's, like, last one I did was, like, 10 companies or something like that have their products there. Right? So now, like, if someone's, like, just quickly types in buy gin, and they're thinking about, like, ordering online, you're included. They come to your website. It's a brand new way that you've got new exposure. So those things are key, and honestly, your Wix or these other sites, you could do it, but their analytic packages are pretty poor. The page speeds are pretty poor unless you really start upping what your monthly payment is. And then it depends upon, are you a local brand? Are you a national brand? Are you international? And then, how do you create redundancy? in servers across, North America or the world, so that, someone clicking on their phone in Victoria gets the information as fast as someone doing it in, Quebec, Tokyo, Texas, and that's really scalable. That's actually really affordable too. That's pretty standard these days.
I'm always blown away with. I never really argue about or complain about the organic reach. When you have more and more people on a platform, it's going to happen. Organic reach on Instagram has dropped. Organic reach on Facebook dropped forever ago. I always say I remember when I opened up Little Jumbo in 2013. We had 1,000 fans for the page the night we opened, and so just seeing the organic reach of there and then in 2013 compared to now, and having multiple pages on Facebook now and looking at the fan count there that have been, and it's been around for 6 months, 12 months, with tons of content going on the page, it just shows the organic reach has shrunk so drastically over the last 7 years. So let's just bounce into online presence. Where do you see going top down, where the focus for most hospitality industry places should be focusing their efforts on, as like you're talking about the spokes of a wheel, go from spoke to spoke to spoke. Which should be the first spoke?
I think the first spoke should be Facebook, because of the data set you can get, and you can reach out and get to know people. On a one-to-one, you're a restaurant and you saw someone come in and you stop by their table and they leave you a nice review or share a post or something like that. It's a really, you answer them back the next day. That will, that's like a pebble in a pond, right? That will cause ripples amongst the friends and anyone who sees it. So Facebook is a really nice way for people, distilleries, that people drop by for tastings, whatever it happens to be. It's a great community zone. I think an email list is super important, and that might be the next one. I mean, those ones are sort of tied. Like there's some really base fundamental ones. A third one is actually search results. People ask questions and you really want to be in there for all the top ones. Like you really want to get the data that tells you, how do people search? Like what are the most highly searched terms that relate to my business or my products? And where can I get in? Like where can I fit myself into that? Because that will, as long as you're vigilant and you keep it up to date and you keep adding to it, that will always bring in new customers, right? They'll be exposed to your brand or your restaurant for the first time. So, when COVID ends and we've got tourists coming through here, or we get tourists coming through here before COVID ends, I don't know. But basically think about, people from other parts of the world in Victoria Googling restaurants to eat at, right? Or people looking for like world's best gin, you'll get some answers. You say world's best contemporary gin, and actually there's a zero-click answer, and it's victoriabuzz.com that has that answer. It's not actually, Sheringham, even though they reference Sheringham directly in it. So there, anyone who wanted to know what that was, who had no idea, that's a great exposure. And so when I look at distilleries, they should be looking at recipes. People never know how to make drinks, or they're always wanting to make a new drink, or they're at the grocery store and they're like, oh yeah, what goes in that again? I mean, there's a lot of searching that happens, for just questions. And if you can build the answers into your website, so that's your next big one. I think YouTube, depending upon what your customer demographic is, I think running a 6-second YouTube commercial can be pretty powerful. I would do it at certain times. I wouldn't do it all the time. but that 6x exposure can be really big. The thing is, though, it's not just about like what are these channels, what are these spokes in the wheel. It's super important to recognize that you need to plan out what your message is going to be. Mm-hmm. You know, people love stories, books, movies, whatever. Your message should be some sort of story format. You should be looking to engage with a story. That's even Instagram posts. You can do a series of slides. They tell a story. Mm-hmm. That's the engaging content you want, not a flat, boring bottle shot with glass. Not you know, for some of the restaurants. There's some are pretty good because food sort of is eye catching, but that type of food needs to appeal. And so you could do a series of plates, a series of things, and you know, before, middle, and end, right? There's a lot of things you can do, and so when you're picking these different mediums, these channels, you should be really thinking about the story format, and can you weave a story across all the different you know, channels? So can you tell part of a story on Facebook, the other part of the story on Instagram, because they're both owned by the same companies. You use your ads, you know, you buy ads through the same place. And if you're capturing your audience, you could then, once they've seen one ad, you could send them the next ad. And like you sort of begin to have this, you know, conversation with them or this engagement with them where you're not just, here's a shot, here's another shot, here's another shot. And they don't all relate. They're, you know, they're essentially look at my product or look at my service, but think about like selling a story as an experience, right? So.
Do you think there's like we all talk about social media being super interactive and all this sort of stuff? Do you find on business pages, because this is what I find 9 times out of 10, is the capabilities of how interactive it can be astronomical, but the actual utilization of that interactive, like I see a lot of restaurants, a lot of bars, a lot of everything, like it's splattered up and it's like a painting. Like look at it and that's it. And if you comment, it doesn't get interacted with. It's literally, oh, this is really cool, and that's it. Like a simple emoji response is enough just to show that you have a community. And I find that a lot of people have found social media as being this like one-way street where you're just putting out everything, but there's no actual interaction.
Right. Yeah, you need to engage your audience. If you are on these channels, and you should be, like you know, people are hearing like, oh, that's work. Yeah. Well, but it's also like, you know, encouraging and responding back to your customers, right? And think about if you're a customer of someone else's business, isn't it better when they pay attention to you? Isn't it better when they respond to you? And like that's sort of like, it's important that you put the paradigm there and think about it the other way so that you understand where your customers are coming from. And you know, a lot of business owners do, but it's something to think about. You need to re-engage for sure.
It's a verbal. It's a virtual table touch. Like industry lingo. It's like I remember when, like even when Clive first started taking on, I remember that Twitter was really big in 2009. I think Twitter's making a bit of a resurgence to a degree. But I remember it being like finishing up my shift at Clive's and walking home and literally, this is before Instagram, literally answering tweets and Facebook comments. And that was my walk home ritual, listen to music and change up and interact with every single person and like say, thank you very much for coming. I also dealt with complaints via social media, which was really interesting. I remember flying to Cognac and I landed in Amsterdam and there was a tweet that popped up on my feed and it was someone saying that that the two girls behind the bar were misbehaving and like pouring shots and drinking shots and like the music was too loud and they were having fun with their friends and not giving any service to people. And I literally got up and played in Amsterdam and that was on my phone. I'm just like, I screenshot it, sent it to my manager and was like, can you deal with this and let me know how this goes? And I'm always surprised when I see those sort of things on Twitter feeds and on Instagram feeds, but there's no and positive and negative, no like interaction, no like consumer interaction with it.
Right.
So after Google searches and search engines, do you find that when you start talking this sort of way with analytics, especially analytics with consumers, I start glazing over. There's so much data. There's so much data to go through. But it's funny how it still gets demonized. This data gets demonized, but then a print magazine will say that they have 15,000 readers, and they're like, "Oh, I'll do a quarter-page ad."
Yeah. The idea of glazing over with all of the analytics and all that kind of stuff. Just to sidestep for a second, I actually stopped telling people like people ask me like what I do, and I find that like I go down this rabbit hole, and then afterwards I would see their face, like the looks on their face, and they'd be like kind of lost and be like, I don't know why I did that. I do web stuff, like it's way more than they like expected to bite off, right? It is funny how people will buy ads in magazines and they really there's no feedback loop on it, right? Like they don't know how many people like dwelled on that page with their ad at that for one they buy the 1/4 or 1/8 or whatever that the size of the ad is. It's in this day and age it's weird that is still like the top thing, even TV in some ways. Like you really need to know who your demographic is that's watching those shows and those hours in that region to run the ad, because it matches, a big enough percentage matches against your customer base, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas with social media, you define it, right? Like you want to run this ad in these cities on these streets. Like geo-targeting is amazing. Like I only want to hit this area code, and I want to hit, I want this ad to show up for the next 2 weeks in front of people that make X or Y, or, like the following things, because I know a lot of my customers like the following things, and you make sure that they're within the age category of, whatever you're selling, that they can afford it and they want to buy it. Right. Because the reason why you're doing that is you want to make sure that they have the money to buy it because you spent money to put it in front of them. Right. Like, there's a lot of instant feedbacks, and then you go and you look at the analytics, right? You take your website analytics, you take your social media analytics, you take your, Shopify, if you're running a Shopify store, and you take, your Excel spreadsheets, if you've got, other data, and you can layer them all over top of each other, and it will tell you a story. And that story can help you make really smart decisions on how to increase your business or how to maintain your business.
So that's a good segue into tangible tracking. We were talking before we went on air about distilleries and BC tracking, because I think this sort of breaks down. It gets away from the techie sort of stuff that people usually throw their hands up and go, I don't get it, so I'm just going to walk away. Right. To actually bringing a tangible sort of nature into it, because I don't think a lot of people can define mission statements. So when you get down to the fundamentals of when you start a new project, distillery, winery, whatever, what are you? To say that you're a good place, a great place with good atmosphere that has good food, that mm-hmm. if you took that and put that online, that's literally 99.99% of every single restaurant and bar in the world. What do you fundamentally do? So applying that tangibility offline to actually help you online, I think is going to bring a lot of great value, because as you were saying, distilleries, do they track where their sales are? And then do they use that tracking of region specific, or is there a space, an area that they want to break into with a certain liquor store that has a good reputation? let's dive into like the tangibility and tangible tracking that a lot of distilleries and wineries I personally don't think that they do to really boost in a very simple way how they advertise online.
Right. So, do you know that, private liquor store A, has your product and sells X amount of your product every 2 weeks, every month? And do you know that private liquor store B has your product, sells it occasionally, and why? Why is there the discrepancy between liquor store A and private liquor store B? And if you can figure that out, then you can begin to run ads to sell more of that product. Whether it's, maybe B's a lost cause, maybe we can sell way more at A. Hopefully you're sending someone in there, a rep or yourself, to like walk in, eyeball the two just to see where your product is placed on the shelves and, that kind of stuff, because that's super important. But the other idea is like, if you can build a system where private liquor store A ordered a bunch of new product from you, and it just went up on the shelves, you can run ads to notify your favorite customers in that region. That's like targeting, right? Like you drop it an area code, drop that pin, use your customer base and notify them. And you're not spending a lot of money. I mean, people might immediately go, well, they're your customers already, but it's a top of mind thing. Coca-Cola spends crazy amounts of money putting their name out there over and over and over again for a reason.
Yes.
It's a reminder when they go into the store what they want to buy, so they don't try something else.
Pepsi,
because there's always new products.
Super Bowl.
Right, exactly. The duality marketing, right? The duality marketing is there's always two big ones.
Yeah.
And then there's everybody else underneath. But yeah, I mean, you sort of want to figure out where your product is, in cities or provinces, what the turnover rate of those stores are, and then how you amplify it. How do you increase the sales of those so that you can make the big jump if you're a smaller distillery or a smaller winery, right? Like, so that you've got a system in place. And then once you gather the data to figure out who that audience is, who are your loyal customers, who are your occasional customers, you can generate different ads to talk to each audience different. But you need to absorb the data, right? And you need to apply the data with, I would call the liquor stores your partners, right? You need to have a conversation with them and see if you can do cross promotion. There's a whole bunch of things that you could potentially do once you actually, figure out what's actually happening in the bricks and mortar store and with your brand.
And when you start crunching down analytics, is it, let's take away sort of the Wizard of Oz, pull back the curtain, is when you really start crunching down analytics, is it the rabbit hole that a lot of people sort of have the impression that analytics is, whether it be on Facebook with Pixel, so on and so forth? Is it the rabbit hole, or more better question is, can it be held back from being a rabbit hole?
Yes and no. So you can set up your analytic package so that it's not a rabbit hole, and that this goes back to the very beginning idea of like your website and what do you want to do. When you're answering those questions, you should also be trying to figure out like what do you need to know from it. What do you need to know from your digital presence? Your social media, your website, your email list, because that is what those are the questions you're going to ask through the data studio that you're using from all the different sources. And, it is time consuming initially to build the different, like say you're going to build a funnel template, and you will track where everybody comes from, how long they spend on your website, how much they buy, how many products they looked at, how many shopping carts were abandoned, and then new customers versus repeat customers. what device did they use? Are they buying on the desktop? Are they buying on their phones? And then, once you have like that funnel, you can start figuring out like maybe there's too many clicks, in which this is often the case. There's too many clicks to get to the sale, right? I mean, that's why Amazon they patented the their one-click buy button. Because it drives sales like crazy. So you need to, on your website, you need to shorten the amount of clicks to get to anything. And that's also why you end up building these verticals, these silos of information, because you want to get there and keep them there in as few clicks as possible to get them what they want. And so you can build out, these I call them sheets of information, right, where you funnel all the information from the various sources, website, social media, email list, what have you. Maybe even your Excel spreadsheet if you're tracking where inventory is placed. You put it all together, and you're looking at a lot of information, like more than you realize is available to you. And so the setup of that is time consuming. But once it's set up, you don't change it very often. You might tweak it every once in a while because you ask a new question, but oftentimes you just end up asking enough questions that you need to build a different sheet, right? A different readout. And so, they call them dashboards in Google Analytics because it is like a dashboard. You get all these like pie charts and graphs and things like that. But building those things, a little time up front, but once they're in place, you're basically using them all the time. Can you go down the rabbit hole? Yeah, because you can really, start trying to figure out, why are you losing people at X click and from Twitter? Or, here's one. You want to, I've always disliked this for as long as I've been doing this. So say since 2003. What is direct? If you go into Google Analytics, what is direct traffic? And these days, it's actually worse than it was back then because you can have dark social, which is, I text you a link to something. You click that link, that's going to show up as direct. Like there is no way to capture what that is because I texted it to you. But if you can figure out, if you can start applying, universal tracking codes to your different to Facebook, you use like a Facebook tracking code. For Twitter, use a Twitter tracking code. If something breaks along the way, you can reduce the amount of direct just with the tracking code. Bookmarks are another direct. So you can go down the rabbit hole trying to figure out where your direct traffic is coming from and, why you have tons of sales or no sales that way. Yeah, another way that can be direct that might not result in sales is you haven't whitelisted your own IP address for your computer, like your cell phone or right. So you go to your website a lot, and it's not being, and so you drive up the numbers of visitors. Your own address, you have your own bookmark, and so your direct goes way, way, way up. And so if you whitelist it, then those numbers come out of it, and maybe your direct converts really well. But because you go all the time and you're not buying from it, or maybe you do go all the time and you're buying it as like promo codes or like you're doing something with the inventory that's throwing the numbers off. Like there's some ways to go down the rabbit hole for sure. So that's one example. There's tons.
I've seen your reports. Trust me. So let's try and tie this off into a nice little bow because I think the real thing, like we've just had a long 45-minute conversation here, and I still think there's going to be always people who go, but it's not really for me, or but it's going to be expensive, or but it's not going to do anything for me. Where's my ROI? Because when we sell a bottle, I think we live in the tangible. Like we sell a dish of food, we sell a bottle of alcohol, we sell a cocktail. It's a tangible transfer of funds. You know that the alcohol you bought gets turned into that, gets put into there, and then you get money for it. I think that the online sphere, I think hospitality is probably maybe 10, 15 years behind in a way that the understanding of the return of investment is just not capable. And so how would you like to sort of to end this conversation with, how do you get people's mentalities over that hurdle to completely understanding just, and to be honest, like I know from my experience, I think the ROI on online marketing and stuff like that is way higher than print and that sort of thing. Like, I think that it's absolutely, and it's boundless and endless, but I think the ROI is way better return on investment than many other forms of advertising and marketing. But how do you get people who are so stuck in their ways, like most of this industry, where a lot of people still use Excel to do inventory and use Excel to do their scheduling, or take Pagliacci's, until 2015, they didn't even have a POS. Everything was still handwritten bills. How do you get them over this? When Soule took over is when it all got technological down there. But how do you get people over this hurdle to really understand and really try and wrap their head around the fact that online presence, marketing, geotagging, all these sort of fancy words we've used during this conversation can actually really benefit them aggressively on a long-term scale?
Well, okay, so when you think of the products you're selling, don't think of the one-off sale, right? Like, if you know you have a product or service that will bring customers back again and again and again, think of the ROI of the marketing to land that customer, and they will buy again and again and again. And you can then, you figure out, what's my profit margin in this? What's my profit margin over the next year? How, along the lines of, like, how often do you think that this customer is going to come back? And you figure out, what is the cost of acquisition? What does it cost you in marketing dollars to get in new customers that repeat buy, your product or your service? That information is totally online. All the tools are there for you. You can figure that out fairly easily. When you look at all the, I don't want to call them archaic, but like older marketing systems, it's guesstimates. Like, they're guessing that your product was in front of all these people, and the reason why your sales are up is because you ran ads. There's no way that they actually know, unless people are like clipping something out of like newspapers or magazines and bringing them in, right? I mean, you can run a promotion that is like a sale promotion, and you can put it on billboards and all that kind of stuff. But will that keep the customers coming back over and over and over again for that cost? Or is it better that, like, once you have those customers, that you nudge them for way cheaper through social media? And then on top of it, once you nudge them and you know who they are and they come back, can you create another audience? Like, in other words, you have a loyal customer base of 10,000. And you have data, like, it's anonymous data. You don't know people's names or anything like that, but like ages, demographics, who they are. You can take that 10,000 and plug it in to the marketing and be like, give me a lookalike audience. Give me another 10,000 people that have never experienced me or my service before, right, or my product, and let's market to them with what we know works for this other 10,000. Like, print, TV, they can't do that. You're still guessing at how many people opened the page and stayed on the page, how many people actually watched that commercial and didn't fast forward. They record their favorite shows and then just skip through them. Like how do you know? Right? It's hard that way. The other way, it's hard. It only makes sense if you really care about ROI. You really want to go social media. You really want to go internet marketing. I mean, the data is available.
What's also that thing is, like, you still pay a premium, which is crazy. You still pay a premium for print media. And if you wanted to advertise in the 10 top magazines in your region, it would cost you far and away if you did the same ad on social media 10 different ways to different markets in the same area.
Right.
So it still blows my mind that people, but I try and evolve, and I try and get better and build new skill sets. And I think with all this COVID stuff, I think we've talked about it a couple of times now, is that with COVID, I think if you're coming out of all this lockdown and this time not working, or if you're part-time working or whatever, and you haven't picked up a new skill, then you've really missed a massive opportunity.
Right.
No, you go.
Sorry, I was going to say, I feel for people that, in the COVID rush, they didn't have a good presence, and they rushed and made decisions and bought services from people that didn't pan out, and they feel burnt. And I've seen that in the legal industry. I think that's ubiquitous across the web. People don't know what they're buying. It costs a lot of money, and once they're burned, they're shy to try it again. But I tell you, there are a lot of good service providers out there. It's just trying to figure out who they are and what they're offering you.
Mm-hmm. And education comes in a big portion of that as well.
It should be a long conversation. You should really have a long conversation with a provider way before you're spending money, because then you need to know what you're getting.
Well, that's what I was mentioning, the whole Wizard of Oz, pull the curtain back, because I find... Right. And I think that's in every industry. We have a lot of it in the cocktail scene with the really super geeky cocktails. The cloak comes up and the prep and everything happens behind the scenes, but really it's basically anybody can do what I do. Just if you can do it 400 times repetitively over a 10-hour shift, that's why I am who I am. But pulling back the curtain and really being transparent and honest with clients, I think, is a big thing that's gonna have to change, because clients are getting more savvy. Right. But I want to thank you for your time, man. As always, we chat 5 times a week, so I'm happy to sort of give I want to give people insight into sort of not just what you do, but what we're doing together. Mainly because you've experienced this with me now, being known as the cocktail guy, or you're the restaurant guy. When I just do a little bit more than that. But thanks for your time, man, and I'm sure we'll probably chat tomorrow.
Sounds good. All right.
See you, buddy. Bye.
See ya. Bye.
Thanks for listening, Pose Shifters. I hope you enjoyed that episode. I really enjoy sitting down with friends and peers and just chatting about the industry and getting down to the nuts and bolts of what's really going on out there. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, everything on all the platforms. Just hit it up and I'll do my best to answer any queries or questions you have. I'll see you next week, guys. Bye.